Your company might be burning millions to ensure you hate every waking second of your job. Sure, we can all agree that work isn't supposed to be a vacation. We trade our time for money, and that's the end of it. But the idea that companies would pay extra in order to make our life miserable seems insane. Unfortunately, this is the end result of a sequence of events involving optimization, profit, and an eroding sense of what it means to be human. Most companies pour cash into systems that measure productivity with almost surgical precision. Every keystroke, lunch break, and Slack ping is being monitored and recorded with a singular focus: squeezing more work out of less effort. A simple plan that is in line with the spirit of American work culture. In reality, bugs happen, systems crash, and humans stay human. Take Sarah, an analyst at a mid-sized tech firm. One morning, she's flagged for underperformance. Her spreadsheet time dipped below the target. Except for the fact that she wasn't slacking, her program was only lagging and needed an update, a mundane and reasonable downtime that the KPI tracker didn't know. The system sees only numbers and deviation, so it flags her for underperformance, and her manager is pulled from her own work in order to investigate. Then a third person has to verify and file the report. 3 people, hours lost, all because a program lagged for 30 seconds. And that is just the start. This is a pretty common and frequent incident. Now imagine that frequency scaled up to the size of Microsoft, with its almost 228,000 employees. The amount of wasted time and revenue is not insignificant. Now bear in mind, these systems and assurances are meant to shave off minutes at a time in the first place, so the improvements were already marginal. As more and more companies invest in optimization, the more human complexity becomes a problem, because the system is not built to adapt to reality, only to enforce an impossible output. They don't eliminate mistakes, they only amplify them. But how is this even possible? After all, I'm not the first person to bring this to light or make these claims. The productivity paradox is something that's intuitively understood, from the warehouse floor all the way to the White House. Even politicians lament about the amount of bureaucracy taken to enact action. So who's to blame? Oftentimes, key policymakers are completely separated from those with the boots on the ground doing the actual labor. This disenfranchisement leaves a wide blind spot for any prospective salesperson to slip through. And why not? The pitch almost writes itself. Want to get efficiency up and get more out of your workers? Simply track what they're doing and see the lollygaggers and overperformers. They might even cite some misrepresented statistic or fact to support their claim.
Of course we got it. You know we got it. Yeah, we got it.
Stating they save other companies billions with the same software that your company needs.
In what world?
But here's the truth. You're not really saving anything. Tracking software costs money, time, and trust. Then you spend hours training everyone on software that's clunky, slow, and outdated.
Hey Lou, what you writing?
I have no idea.
And heaven forbid you have some sensitive personal information on your work computers. The amount of regulation and red tape you have to go through just to even conceive of applying a product is tens of thousands of dollars in lost hours. And what does it all really stop? Not laziness, only humanity. And these miraculous cost savings are typically poorly fabricated. Take, for example, outsourced customer service. Most call center contractors are experts at this sort of grift, stating survey results, time spent on phones, and savings as their main motto. But are you really helping anyone when a customer disconnects because the call is so frustrating? Those supposed savings don't account for the millions of dollars of lost revenue and lack of repeat customers, or chargebacks initiated because they couldn't get the problem resolved. This even applies to something as commonplace as clocking in and out for work. I will acknowledge that jobs with rotating or differing shifts would work better with manual entries for work times. But why are white-collar employees with unchanging schedules required to type their credentials on a keyboard in order to get paid? From the start, this system creates more problems than it solves. Even if you could perfectly track every minute of productivity, what do you really gain? It's an Ouroboros of competence, a system eating its own tail. Sure, you might tighten up lunch breaks or catch someone taking an extra 5 minutes. People still need to eat, and you'd be hard-pressed to convince anyone that finishing a spreadsheet matters more than going to the doctor. And in customer-facing jobs, the goal should be simple: make life better for the client. But with these automated tracking systems, workers start doing the opposite, cutting corners, delaying service, hiding offline, just to protect their own health. Now, none of this makes any sort of sense. And the most sinister part is, that is exactly the point. Even if a leader is aware of these problems, they may be hesitant to loosen up the reins, because they know one superseding fact: that the culture and regulation of society impacts productivity more than any other metric they can use. And what exactly is the American work-life culture? It's all about being drained after work, being too tired to cook, being forced to order in. No creation, only consumption. The system doesn't want you producing anything for yourself. It wants you consuming quietly, because it fuels the economy far better than contentment ever could. And when you're tired, you don't protest, you don't organize, you don't vote. You just keep feeding the machine, it's a walking zombie, until it starts looking like less of a life and an economy, and more like a company. Now I know that idea seems far-fetched to most people, and completely inhumane and divorced from reality to others. However, that is where the perception is warped. Big business leaders are not like you and me.
Yay.
What?
I got accepted.
Occasionally, you may have a college dropout or high school flunky rise to the top, but a majority of the time, a CEO has an MBA from some prestigious business school, like Wharton or Harvard. This closed-loop system ensures certain base ideas can be passed through and whispered along the halls of higher education. This fact is something well studied and noted. The more time a populace has to itself, the more time people have to organize, rebel, and criticize. By sucking up and rationing the one resource that no one can get back, time, they can force an obedience out of people that is almost unquestionable, to the point where even if you're fully aware of it, there's not much you can do to break the cycle. Why would I care who has nukes when I need to buy food? Corporations have proven time and time again that the only reason they pretend to have morals is due to regulation and public outcry. If there were no room to criticize, most businesses would go back to the corporate town model, where every aspect of your life is controlled and owned by your employer. Since such a nightmare is now impossible for corporations, they have developed a sickening alternative: engineering exhaustion as a product. Think about the very office environment you occupy. The fluorescent lights humming above your head, the endless cascade of emails, Slack pings, and meeting invites, all stacked like digital bricks designed to fragment your attention. Every ping, every notification is a subtle reminder that your time is not your own. And the more fragmented your attention, the easier it is to feed you into the machine of consumption and compliance. It's about a philosophy baked into the DNA of corporate capitalism, that human beings are resources first, citizens second, and everything else is either optional, expendable, or dangerous. The fewer hours you have for yourself, the less likely you are to notice the bigger picture, and the more likely you are to buy convenience over quality, to accept scripted and false narratives over independent thought. So the data that we're all supposed to trust, the numbers, the productivity, the KPIs, are almost always misleading, acting as sweet siren calls to executive ears, telling them what they want to hear, not what is actually happening on the ground. Your effort, frustration, ingenuity are all things that don't fit onto a spreadsheet, but that doesn't matter. The feeling of control is enough. Meanwhile, those same leaders sit in glass towers, sipping artisanal coffee and discussing quarterly margins, oblivious to the slow erosion of the very workforce that sustains their empire. Funnily enough, they suffer none of the same restrictions placed on their underlings. Wining and dining for hours is seen as good business and networking. They have optimized schedules, private assistance, and most importantly, distance. You would think that when a person gets paid 10 times the rate of the normal employee, they would have 10 times the monitoring, unless it was never about the monitoring at all. History tells us something similar. The factory towns of the Industrial Revolution weren't just about production. They were about shaping lives, where workers lived, how they ate, when they slept, all being manipulated to maximize efficiency. Today's corporations are not armed with digital technology and surveillance software, building the exact same company towns in the cloud. We no longer live bounded by walls, we live our lives bounded by algorithms. And this extends beyond work hours. Consumption is now a tool of governance. Even your voting patterns and your neighborhood conversations are all subtle behaviors shaped by the rhythm of exhaustion. A tired population is predictable, which is what makes them controllable. Corporations are intertwined with the state in ways most people can never see, relying on that predictability in order to keep the world spinning in their favor. Because the truth, as uncomfortable as it is that life cannot be fully optimized. Mistakes will happen, and breaks will be taken, and creativity will overflow any Excel sheet. And that is the one loophole in the corporate town that the machine cannot calculate: your unpredictability. Which is why, even in the most surveilled office, one of the most exhausting schedules, even when corporations seem omnipotent, the human element remains messy, inconvenient, and uncontrollable.